Welcome to the Clearly Beneficial podcast, the show where we rip off the Band-Aid and explore the future of healthcare, benefits, and the people driving innovation in the industry. This episode is brought to you by Health Next, the company leading the way in helping employers build enduring cultures of health and well-being, reducing medical cost trends, and increasing organizational performance. To learn more how they can help you, visit healthnext.com.
And welcome to the Clearly Beneficial podcast. I'm Vinny Catalano, and I'm so excited to be here today with a friend. I went back and took a look. We've known each other a little over 3 years. Nell Goodarzi, she's in London, England. And Nell is an ex-investment banker turned executive advisor. She works privately with a select number of senior executives, as well as purpose-driven companies and their leadership teams. She advises her clients on a broad range of complex topics that range from business to personal to wellness. Welcome, Nell.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Well, I am too. Nell and I and my wife, Carrie, we all met each other on holiday in Spain, in Ibiza. And the moment I met Nell was actually, I was in a very strange yoga pose. And she could tell I was struggling. And she said, just lay on your back. And she gave me permission to fail in a yoga class. And I wasn't failing, but at least they took the tension off my back so I can be a human being. And that's the moment we met. And then subsequent to that, we were sitting in the lounge at the hotel, and we got to chatting. And at that moment in time, Nell was in this interesting transitional journey between being an investment banker for one of the largest banks in the world, having lived in Hong Kong, correct me if I'm wrong, Singapore.
Yeah.
She lived around the world. She was looking for, what the heck do I do next? Because she had experienced a fair amount of stress and burnout. And insightfully, she said, I can't do this anymore. So take us from that moment of wisdom to realize that you gave yourself the permission to take the ladder from the corporate wall and put it on your own wall.
Absolutely. And that's a great story, Winnie, actually, because what you've reminded me of as well is that when we were discussing this in that moment in time, you actually asked me, why are you here by yourself? And I remember both you and Kerry being so surprised that I was in this beautiful retreat resort all by myself. And I remember saying to you, I'm here because I need to think. I'm trying to figure some things out, and then obviously shared my story with you guys. So it's been an interesting journey because I remember that moment well. And to be very honest with you, I didn't have a plan. I didn't sit there thinking, I woke up one morning and I'm going to be a medical doctor, or I'm going to start my own business, and this is exactly what it's going to look like.
I want to stop you there for a quick second, because I want you to just take a minute and tell everyone what you did prior.
Okay. Yes. That's a very, very good point. So prior to leaving corporate, I actually spent over 15 years in investment banking, and I worked a lot with clients, with CEOs, various different positions all around the world. I mean, we're talking from Hong Kong to Singapore to Tokyo to New York. So a very, very international career, and a career that I always really wanted, a career that ever since I was at university, I knew that this was going to be something that I wanted to do, and did it and absolutely loved it. But as with a lot of people, high stress careers, you do it for long enough, eventually it is going to start eating at you a little bit. But there was also a moment, I want to say, somewhere along the lines of, let's say, my mid-20s. So this is a while ago now, where I remember thinking, there's got to be more to life than this. And not because I didn't love my job, because I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, but I just wanted to have a bigger impact. And what does that actually look like? What more can I do? So I started volunteering for a lot of different causes, taking on mentees. I mean, you name it. There was a whole plethora of sort of side hustles. But it still wasn't enough. And I just could not shake off that question. And when I then got to a point where, a personal health crisis off the back of burnout forced me to sort of slow down a little bit And that was actually the moment where you and I met in Ibiza. It was in that slow down period of I'm coming off the high paced corporate roller coaster. I'm for the first time in 15 plus years having a moment to myself, which I hadn't done because I mean, who takes holidays? You know, who does all these things? You don't have time when you are a senior leader very often to do that. Or if you do, your CEO is calling you every 2 seconds asking for something. And that's, you know, that's part and parcel of the life that you lead. But it was the first time, you know, since prior to going to university, I'd ever had a moment to actually sit down and think, what do I want? Who am I in this new
And you have to
space? What
shed that corporate shell. You
absolutely.
have the armor of being, in that corporate environment all the time, and all the defense mechanisms and all the
Yeah,
adaptations and all the things you have to use to get there with that. And you're like,
yeah.
Okay, now what do I do with my sword?
Yeah, what 100%. And also, who am I without the corporate branding? Who am I without the job title? Who am I without the expense account? Who am I without, you know, that constant sense of urgency that you have in corporate because it's always the next crisis or the next deal or the next whatever it is that you're chasing, but you're always chasing something. And for the first time, I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm not chasing anything. I've manifested and created everything that I've ever wanted. So now what do I do? Because my body is completely broken, but I'm very clear on the type of life that I want to live, but I have no idea how I'm going to get there. And what does that even look like? But yeah, being in that moment where who are you, to your point, without your corporate armor? What does that actually look like? And are you even allowing yourself to dream as big as you need to dream? Because all you've ever known for the past almost 20 years is that corporate environment, because there is so much conditioning that, you know, sits around that. And I remember, you know, sitting there thinking about all of these questions and thinking about who I wanted to be in the next season of my life, where I wanted to live, what I wanted my life to look like, and just feeling, to be honest, very overwhelmed and thinking, where do I even start? What does this even look like? But interestingly, that week that we spent in Ibiza, you know, Kerry and yourself were there at the same time, and I think we left a couple of days apart. That week actually gave me an awful lot of clarity because sometimes sometimes you have to allow yourself to actually stop to figure out what it is that you want and you need. You cannot do that when you're in the middle of the crises, when you're kind of stuck in the corporate grind. And I'm sure you've had this as well previously in your corporate career. You
Well, I
go on
just I just went
holiday.
through it the last 2 years. I mean,
Yeah, right?
just leaving the proper insurance brokerage business to take a breath, and over the 2 years you experiment, you try this, you try that,
Mm,
and you dabble in some things, you dabble out of some things, and
hmm.
then you know here I am now deciding to do a podcast.
Yeah.
So here we are.
But how amazing is that? And to be honest, I did the same thing, you know, because I think one of the things that I've realized as well, and I've seen this both with myself, but I also see it a lot with clients, is that we all sort of assume that when we are pivoting out of corporate, we often pivot into the thing that is the least like what we're experiencing in that moment in time. So the amount of investment bankers that I hear they want to become yoga teachers and they want to go and live in Bali because it's the polar opposite. Now, for some of them, that absolutely is their calling and it is what they should be doing. But for 90%, that probably isn't the case, right? But it's almost that reaction to this environment is no longer serving me. I need to pivot out into something else. This is what I'm seeing on Instagram. It's also the polar opposite of the life that I'm living. This feels really good. And then, of course, when they get there, they realize I love yoga, but I love being a practitioner. I
I
hate
love making
teaching.
and I love making money because I have bills to pay.
Abs- yeah, absolutely. So there are, it's so nuanced, right? And I did all of those things like you. I mean, I trained as a yoga teacher. I did that. I did the whole Bali, India thing, you know, many, many
And
years
a shout
ago.
out to your handstands, by the way.
Yeah, still
And,
working on it, still working on it, getting there. I mean, it taught me an awful lot, and I met some fabulous people as a part of it. And again, it's a part of that process that you have to go through on a personal level to sometimes you have to discount what you don't want to do to figure out what you do want to do. So it has definitely been a process for me personally, and that stepping out of corporate, really taking that decision it took a long time, because the thing that people also don't realize, I get a lot of DMs and messages, and sometimes WhatsApp, from people who know me personally, saying, "Oh, this is so amazing that you're doing this. I could never do what you're doing, etc." And the reality, of course, is that what people don't see is what people see is the chap that I'm currently in, but what they don't see is the 4, 5, 6, 7 years prior to that, where I taught yoga, I went back to university, I did all of these different things that ultimately sort of landed me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it is a journey, and I think our own pressures in life
Mm,
don't allow us to give ourselves the grace to want to do those things. You get on the treadmill, and I just look at people on the treadmill all the time, just grinding, 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 until they get to a point of saying, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to
mm,
retire.
mm,
I don't see retirement as an option for me personally, because I
mm,
just see it as it's just doing this and doing whatever I feel like. And I think that's the key to me. I get to do whatever I feel like doing. And
mm,
I think you're at the same moment. You're getting to do what you feel like doing. You're not having to do a damn thing. You can do the thing that you have passion for, and you can really, make a go of it. And which you are. I mean,
mm.
watching you, on Instagram to start, you were posting a bunch of stuff on Instagram. Now you're mostly off Insta. Now you leaned into LinkedIn and probably other approaches. But I mean, I got to say, I felt like I gave you the nudge over the precipice to go on to LinkedIn.
You 100% did. And it was actually you and probably two other people who, from the get-go, said to me, what are you doing on Instagram? What is it? This is not you, your clients are not there, etc. But we all have to start somewhere. And what I will say though is, yes, my clients are not necessarily on Instagram. It doesn't necessarily serve that purpose. But what it did do was that it actually taught me an awful lot about social media and about how to pull things together, what works. And also, it's a very low stakes environment to actually experiment in many ways, because
Yeah, yeah, it's a good
on
point.
LinkedIn, it's your entire professional network.
Yep.
So for me personally, it actually helped me get over the sort of quote unquote cringe factor of
Yep.
putting myself out there on social media, because I'd never really had social media until I started my own business. I mean, I had accounts, but it was to watch, it was never to post.
Right.
And I remember you saying that to me when we spoke about this probably over a year ago. In all honesty, you said something along those lines, and then you sort of said it again when we spoke the next time, etc. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to pull the plug on this, and actually start putting out some meaningful content on there. And of course, just as we had hypothesized, the right people start finding you,
Well,
because
but because I got to say, the content was so good. I
mm,
mean, the points you were making, the way you wrote, all the things. I mean, it was definitely. I mean, of course, I'm already a fan, but the point is, I then went back, and when I looked at your profile the other day, there's like 8 of my contacts connected to you now. I'm
yes.
like, that's fascinating to me, especially the ones that I saw connecting to you, and I'm like, those are actually the right people that need her more than others.
Yeah.
So, but your content out of the chute was really good, because you were talking about the science behind burnout and the science behind these things. You gave, it wasn't like I'm burnt out, blah, blah, blah. It was like, these are the reasons, these are the manifestations, these are
Mm,
the symptoms, these are the ways to go about treating it. These are
mm,
these are all the things. And I think that's what resonated with me is, wow, content's really good.
mm. I do agree with you, and I think one of the big things that I've realized as a part of this process, and this is obviously for anyone that might be thinking about building a personal brand or a business, is that there's so much advice out there that will tell you this is how you need to post, this is where you need to post, this is how often you need to post, this is how you need to write. And I tried all of that. Like, I tried all of it on for size. I hired a social media coach, all of that stuff. None of it worked for me, in all honesty, because I think the reality these days is that there is so much content on social media these days, and a lot of it is AI generated, especially on LinkedIn, which is very unfortunate,
Yeah.
that actually the single best way for you to stand out it's not following somebody else's cookie cutter recipe. It's actually telling things from your own perspective in your own words.
Right.
Because what the social media world needs now more than anything is actually something that's real. And generally that's what the world needs more, a full stop.
Well, absolutely. And we're getting to this moment where um, AI is I mean, this is a whole this could be a whole other episode for you and I to talk about AI. But AI has become this. I mean, I was watching this freaky TV show. Carrie and I,
Mm,
like when we want to check out, we watch like the strangestly weird things. But there's a new show on Hulu about these four sisters. I'm not even going to name them. And one of the sisters talks to an AI
mm,
about her life and her career and what she should do. You got this, girl, and it's really kind of freaky. It scared me a
mm,
little bit. And so
mm.
this is she's Gen Z, and she just embarked on. I have to laugh. She's 25. She spent 4 years in investment banking,
Mm.
and not for the bank you came from, but from another large European bank. And now she's entering her micro retirement at 25
Yeah.
to find herself. I'm like, your frontal lobe isn't even developed yet, so you can't
Yeah.
even do this, So let's pivot to the business.
Mm.
You hang out the shingle, you're putting out good content, and you find your first client, or your first client finds you.
Yeah.
Share a little bit what you're comfortable sharing about that.
Yeah. So actually, my all of my clients have found me. It's never really, so I don't really, and when I tell people this, they do sort of look at me as if I'm a little bit crazy, because of course it doesn't fit the idea of how one should build a business. But I
Well,
don't do.
Carrie Kelly always says, "Be the target, not the arrow."
Well, and that has always stuck with me ever since you told me that. I actually wrote that down on one of my many, many post-its, and I stuck it on the wall because it was something I
Oh,
wanted
she'll be
to
happy to hear
remember.
that. That's awesome.
No, because it's a brilliant way of rethinking your approach, both to your marketing, but also to client acquisition overall. Because client acquisition sometimes can become so sales orientated that we're actually taking out the relationships and the mystery and the magnetism out of how that actually works in practice. So I don't do cold outreach. I don't pitch to clients. I don't do any of those things. And when I have tried and do it, which I did in the very, very early sort of beginning of my business, it doesn't work for me in the slightest. In fact, it becomes deeply off-putting for whatever reason, because it's just not my gift, right?
Because you're peddling and not listening.
Absolutely.
And this is, I think, I love you saying that, because I feel like I spent all my life, my whole career pitching,
Mm,
right? This
mm,
is the
mm.
first time I'm putting something into the world that hopefully organically people gravitate to, and and it's a thing.
Yeah,
So I don't need to pitch it to anybody. It's
no,
it's here it is. Listen to it and
yeah.
enjoy it, because you will benefit from it. So no, so I'm
Yeah,
happy to hear that that's how it evolved for
100%. And actually, the question that I started asking myself, so alongside, be the target, not the arrow, I had that in the back of my mind. So that was kind of shaping, obviously my thinking. But where I was at was more this, how can I be of service? How can I do more? How can I show up in the world actually being authentically myself with the gifts and the talents and the skills that I have? Because I can't sit there and pretend like I can do everything, because I can't. Nobody can. We all have our own unique strengths and weaknesses, right? So I just decided to start showing up both on LinkedIn, but also in the world with that in mind. And it was very interesting because my very, very first client, who actually I got the loveliest message from her this morning. This is a complete side note, but something that we spoke about in our very first conversation that I didn't even remember. She reminded me of this morning, and she's basically been following the advice that I gave her, and her life has completely changed in every aspect, her career, where she lives, what she does. And it just made me so happy, because here we are, like 9, 10, 11 months down the line of me having met her, and everything she's doing is
That's
completely
amazing.
different. So
That's amazing.
it just speaks to kind of the power that you can have when you actually put your real gifts out into the world. but I'm slightly digressing. So she was the first person that completely randomly, we do not know each other, we don't have any mutual connections, we have never met. She reaches out to me on LinkedIn and says, I loved your post, really resonated with me. I didn't realize there were people like you doing what you're doing. Can we have a virtual coffee? And I said, okay, cool. Let's have a virtual coffee. I'm a huge fan of virtual coffee. So every single week, I have minimum 3 to 5 virtual coffees with people I've never met before, with no agenda, no nothing. And I
That's
still
great.
do it religiously every
That's
Friday.
great. That's awesome.
And I've met the most fascinating people as a consequence of it. But she found me. But she found me because what I was writing about was real. It was raw. It resonated with her own experience, with her worldview. She saw something in me that she hadn't seen in somebody else.
But
And
you
that
also,
coffee,
but you also,
mm,
you also shared some vulnerable things
yeah,
about your journey in your
mm,
posts. It wasn't just like blah blah. It was you
yep.
shared your story in a way that sometimes I read it and I'm like, wow, that took some guts to put that out there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of vulnerability, to be honest, when delivered in a way that is appropriate, because I think there is also such a thing as oversharing. So there is also that there's a time and a space for some of this. But she had really resonated with it, and we ended up having a virtual coffee, which was just the loveliest conversation, and we ended up working together, and it was fantastic. So she was the first person that, that I sort of met through LinkedIn in that kind of way. Now, subsequent clients, interestingly, I have met in coffee shops. I met a client in a sauna because we struck up a conversation about something. I know that sounds
No,
completely
you met me
bizarre,
in a massage class. I mean,
but I met you
not a
in a
massage class, but
yoga.
a
Yeah, I
yoga
met you in a
class.
yoga. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So there is something to be said for these obscure situations that you're both in a neutral energy. I'm not there to pitch or sell. They're not there to buy anything. But we end up having a genuine connection. And that, to be honest, that is where all of my client relationships are born out of. Whether or not they are my one-to-one clients or my corporate clients, they are born out of a depth in that relationship, which is almost instantaneous because we've connected on a human level. We've not connected on a, hey, here's my webpage or my business card or my pitch book. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm sure that works for some people, but it doesn't work for me. So I have literally met most of my clients in the most random places. I mean, like I said, sauna, coffee shop, airport lounges. And then, of course, referral, friends of friends or people that I've worked with previously. So I have quite a few individuals who, I've crossed paths with over
But
the
this has
years.
also happened. You mentioned
Mm,
your first client. I don't know what you said, 8 to 10 months. The
yeah,
acceleration of you and your, I'll use the term loosely, book of business
yeah.
to find new clients. I mean, literally, I said this to you in before we got recording. I said,
Mm,
all of a sudden, here's Nell doing her thing, and all of a sudden, boom, she's doing a thing in Dubai. Boom, she's doing, she's all over the world doing things and working with
yeah.
clients. And now you've pivoted into family offices, and I mean, you're doing this has happened so rapidly, at least
Mm,
from because I've been following the journey. It's
yeah.
just in the last literally months,
Yeah.
3 months. I
But do you
feel
know
like,
what's so funny when you say that is that of course for me because I'd been pondering that question that I was sitting, at that on the sofa in Ibiza over sunset with my wine when we met, I had been thinking about that question for years. Like, what do I want to do next? So it's really interesting that you say that it feels really fast because for me, it feels very slow. It feels like I've been doing this for years and
well,
I'm only
I
now
tell Carrie
finally
Kelly it's
getting
taken me
there.
30 years to be an overnight success, and
Exactly.
you know,
So it's amazing your own perception and obviously the perception of other people. But what I will say though is that the interesting thing for me has been that I think one of the things that we are forgetting in business at the moment, whether or not you are in a corporate career, you're in entrepreneurship, whatever it is that you do for a living, is actually the power of real human relationships, right? Because yes, there were some people have found me, some people I have met, whether or not it was the coffee shop or the sauna or whatever. But many of my corporate clients, for example, have come through my private clients because they work for the same company, or they are the head of the family, or they are, whatever it is that they're doing, right? So there has also been a cascade kind of waterfall effect that has come from that, and clients then referring you to other clients. And this is actually where some of prior to us getting recording, we were talking about culture and obviously having worked in different places, etc. And this is one of those really interesting nuances, right? Because when I started my business, my hypothesis was my business is going to be primarily London based or Europe based, because I'm, physically was located in London the majority of the time in that moment in time. I'm European, so it would make perfect sense. I have an extensive network here. So my book of business, as you like to call it, would come primarily from Europe and most likely from London. That has not turned out to be the case at all. In fact, the smallest number of clients I have is actually in London and in Europe. Most of my clients are based in Asia, they're based in the Middle East, or they're based in the US. And the interesting thing, of course, with Asia-based and Middle East-based clients specifically, is that they refer. If they are happy with you, they will go, and without you asking, they will give your WhatsApp or your business card or your email or your Instagram, whatever it is that you have, or maybe all of the above, to their brother, to their business associate, to their whoever it might be, right? To their client. And before you know it, you have people calling you who you've never met saying, oh, I'm an acquaintance of so-and-so. Can we talk? I have a problem. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I have no idea who you are and I don't know what the problem is, but sure, let's have a conversation.
Well, you become this, and to that point, I feel like there's, and this is why I love Europeans. I love I've traveled the world, so I've
Mm,
experienced cultures from Asia to Europe to not the
mm,
Middle East, but everywhere but it seems, and there's that trust, warmth factor that if you bridge it quickly, like to
yeah.
your point, you're in. I want to kind of pivot, and I love all that because it
Mm,
leads into my next question. Because now
mm,
that you're seeing international clients from all over the world, um, I want to ask you about, what are the maybe two or three common themes you are seeing with these clients, right? Number one,
mm,
because one of the things you posted, and you and I talked about this early on, before we recorded, was one of your clients said, I pay you to think the thoughts that I'm afraid to think myself, or can't think
yeah.
myself, or don't have the time to think myself. That
Yeah.
statement, when I read that in that LinkedIn post, that literally blew me away. I
Mm,
was like, oh wow, people are so busy that they don't even have the time for their own introspection
mm,
to figure out what their own next thing is. And
yeah.
so, what are the themes? Tell me a few of the themes that if there are any, if they're all maybe just random, but I mean, what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely one of them, to be honest, because most of my clients, so this is, I'm thinking, sorry, bleh. Most of my clients, especially on the one-to-one side, there are a lot of common themes. I mean, there are a lot of themes around career pivots. So I get a lot of individuals coming to me thinking, what is my chapter two? And these are all incredibly successful individuals who have, achieved an awful lot. And like you were saying earlier on, they don't want to retire. They want to build again. So whether or not they're serial entrepreneurs or they are CEOs of big companies, there is that desire of what's next, because actually where I'm at, it's not enough. And not enough from a monetary perspective, because they're now at a point in their life when they're looking for more. They're looking for more impact. They're looking for more fulfillment, purpose, etc. So there is definitely a pivoting theme in all of this. There is also a common theme around my clients are actually incredibly self-aware, and they are people who've invested over the years, incredible amounts of money into personal development, into, their physical development, into all aspects to make them the best that they can be. So they are intuitive enough to know that they have blind spots. And they also know, so the client that you were actually referencing, this particular person knows that one of the reasons why there are certain things that, they are unable to currently manifest, if we want to use that word, into their life and into their business, it's actually because of some of their blind spots. And they know that ultimately they need help in sorting that out. So who do you actually get to help you see the things that you maybe even kind of know, but you don't really want to look at. It's like that Pandora's box that you don't want to open, right? Because you know
Right.
that there is a
Don't
Pandora's
put the
box.
mirror up to my face because I'm afraid what
At
I'm going to see. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when you are very self-aware, you're going to know that. And you're also going to know that that is probably the thing that's between you and whatever is coming next, between you and making more money, between you and your optimal health, between you and, having your dream partnership, whatever that may be. So that is definitely something. There is a level of self-inquiry and depth that my clients all have. There are also, a lot of cultural themes that come through as it relates to leadership, longevity, aligned wealth. There's a lot kind of on the business side. And because most of my clients are international, the cultural nuances matter. That many of my clients are expanding into international markets, and it might be a market that they are less familiar with. So, you might be an American client expanding into the Middle East, or you might be a Middle Eastern client expanding into certain parts of Asia. So there is a lot of culture, tradition, ways of doing business, ways of managing potentially, if, let's say that this is a merger type situation, ways of managing the company on the ground that you're not going to understand if you don't understand, let's say,
This
Japanese
is all
culture.
super brilliant because you've seen it in investment banking, how much money is
Mm,
spent on acquisitions and M&A and A and all
yes.
these things, and there's no cultural fit. And a lot of money gets spent and the thing dies because it was not set up right from the get-go because of
Yeah.
the cultural issues. And we see it in the US all the time. I mean, companies buy other companies, and these are all Americans, but
Yeah.
America, as you well know, is a nation of multiculturals and
Yeah.
views and polarization and all the things. And so, no, I mean, I think for you to have such a global view,
Mm,
the challenge and the problem,
mm.
I think that's what a great place to be.
And also actually to add to that, because the reality is that we are in a challenging economic climate. Like there is absolutely no doubt about it, irrespective of where you are in the world. That there are obviously nuances to that, but this is a challenging environment to operate in. And for that reason, most companies do have concerns around their margins. They have concerns around what they're spending their money on. They want to centralize more, whether or not it's their services or their programs or projects or whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is that, let's say, for example, you're an American company and your company has a wellness program or they have a leadership development program. If you take that cookie cutter program and you put that, let's say, in Japan, or you put it in Saudi,
Fail.
probably not going to work the way that you want it to. Like that's just the reality of it. So there is always that desire, because of course we need to hit the targets, we need to keep investors happy, if you're in a company that does have investors. So there are a lot of things to think about, but the fact of the matter is that it's gonna flop. So that's also one of the reasons why, I do spend a lot of time with clients, like I said, both privately, but also with with the overall company as well, because there are those nuances that people just don't consider. I mean, I got a call this morning. This will entertain you, because I got a call this morning from somebody who they're not a client of mine. They're actually an old business contact, and they're American. They had been for their first ever meeting in the Middle East, haven't spent a lot of time there, hadn't quite done their homework, and had gone into a meeting in Riyadh. She's female, client is male, had gone to obviously offer her hand to shake hands when the person on the other side declined, because that's not what they do. you know she's then standing there thinking, okay, well, maybe they want to hug instead, right? Because she genuinely didn't understand the cultural
Yeah,
nuances.
yeah.
So there is a lot of that is just, if you haven't had that experience, how would you know?
No,
You wouldn't
absolutely.
necessarily take all of it into account, because business culture usually is more standardized.
No, and that's this, but unfortunately, it is the school of hard knocks. I mean,
Yeah.
having traveled to Japan and having traveled to other places, when you have to get your business card
Mm,
printed in Japanese on the other side, and you have to give it in a certain way and all the things.
yes.
It's true. And the insightful, smart person will take a minute to train themselves
Mm,
on those cultural. There's
mm,
no reason they shouldn't.
Mm.
This sort of, I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to ask you a closing question, and then we'll wrap. Because I feel like I want to come back on another
Yes.
episode to all the corporate stuff, because I feel like in the corporate, in the C-suite, in,
Mm.
in America especially, you know, companies and worldwide, I'm sure. I mean,
Mm.
companies are starting to lean into AI. I read this kind of scary article yesterday in San Francisco. How all the companies in San Francisco are now, really, the billboards in San Francisco are talking about all these AI companies, and the gist is, let's get rid of all your employees and replace them with AI.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole other conversation to be had about
Yes.
becoming reckoning of mid-career people who are
Yeah.
going to lose their stuff,
Mm.
replaced by AI. So that's a whole other conversation. I
Yeah.
don't want to get I
Yeah.
don't want to get into that right now. Um, but where was I going? I was going with something.
You were going to ask me
Yeah, yeah,
two
yeah. So,
questions and
so
then a
the
closing
question I was
question.
going to
Yeah.
ask you, right, was this. So you have clients who are individuals. You
Hmm.
have clients who are corporations.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's some common threads. Um, where do you see your future? Do you see it leaning really on which do you like better, and where do you see the future in leaning toward individuals versus corporations?
Honestly, I actually really love both. So firstly, what I have to say is that my current priority is serving the clients that I have and serving them well. And I think that has to be, whether or not you're a founder or a banker or a medical doctor, that always has to be your number one priority is doing what you do now really, really well. I absolutely love the one-to-one work because I get the combination of business, of science, of psychology, of life, all of the nuances, and you get a very in-depth perspective into somebody else's world. It's a huge privilege when somebody lets you in that kind of way. But having said that, and actually, sorry, taking a step back. When I first started my business, I thought that I was primarily going to work with people one to one. I wasn't anticipating on having corporate clients. That was something that sort of happened as a natural evolution of the business, and because of requests from one to one clients, who are business owners and run their own corporations. Um, Wait, where was I going with this? Oh yes. But so the corporate client side was kind of born out of that. But what I realized when I started doing more corporate work was actually that there is such a need in that space for change, for different systems, different cultural changes, for real wellness, for real leadership to actually step in,
Right.
that the conclusion I have personally come to is that there is actually a place for both, because I think I mean, yes, a lot of companies have executive coaches, they have cultural consultants, they've got a lot of different things. And in some companies that works well, in other companies it works less well. But I think, unfortunately, one of the things that is not happening necessarily is this overall change with leadership teams themselves, with this underlying systems, with sort of overall that bigger cultural change within the leadership sphere. And that's something that I do want to continue driving, because if we are to have a if we are to have a corporate landscape that is going to look and feel better, with all the challenges that we have with AI, with all the challenges that we have with burnout, all of those things, something has to change.
Yep.
And when I see my clients who are doing this really well, I think there has to be more of that. How can I take this blueprint and put it into, let's say, a larger organization, or put it into a different industry, or whatever that might be, to actually make the corporate world better? Because the corporate world isn't inherently bad. I mean, regardless of what we see on TikTok and LinkedIn, where everybody tells you that we should all be entrepreneurs and we should all be working 2 hours a day and living in Bali, right? That's the current sort of narrative that TikTok likes to depict. The fact of the matter is that not everyone should be an entrepreneur. Not everyone should be a founder. Not everyone should be a portfolio careerist. That doesn't suit a lot of people. So how do we also help the people that are within that system, that want to have corporate careers, that want to go to work every day and feel good about what they do, right? And want to be the best leaders that they can be. So I think there is a space for both. And what I realized as a part of my business journey is that my business is a portfolio business, and I think it always will be.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think what you're doing is really amazing, and all what you just summarized in the last couple of minutes is the topic of the next visit with each other, because you're definitely someone I want to have back. The last question I'm going to ask, and because we got about a minute to go, is Vines with Vinny loves his wine, and I'm asking all my guests to share their favorite grape, wine region. What's favorite wine? I mean, do you have one?
so my absolutely favorite vineyard is actually the Antinori vineyard in Tuscany, which I've been to many. I mean, I can already see you're thinking, oh yes. I mean, it's
Never, I've
such a
never, I've,
great.
I've been to the Antinori tasting room in Florence, but never to
Okay.
any of the vineyards yet. That's the next trip.
Have you? Okay, so you need to go because the vineyards are absolutely incredible. I actually stayed in like a little castillo right next to some of them. I cycled to my wine tastings in different places. It was fabulous. And of course, living in Europe, you can then have crates of wine shipped to your
Yeah.
house, for
No,
basically
I mean,
nothing.
I can't believe you
But
said
but
that because Antinori is to me the one of
it
the,
it 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 is amazing, and actually, Antinori also has a really interesting history in terms of because I think they're the first female-run vineyard in Italy now because the daughters
really.
inherited it, and it's always because basically the parents had no sons, so the vineyard went to the daughters, and it's the first time I think in the family history where that's ever happened, where it's two sisters basically running the show, which is awesome. But Antinori.
Well,
Favorite
Carrie and
one,
I will be in
Sussex.
Milan in April, so it's on my list. So
I will
Nell.
see you guys there.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for being a guest. I really feel this was a very insightful conversation. I think the listeners will enjoy
Mm.
everything you had to say. It's inspirational. It tells the story of a great journey. And till next time.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. Look forward to
Thanks.
our next conversation.
Thank you. This podcast reflects the personal views of the host and guests, not their employers or sponsors. See you next time.